भाई ज़करिया इंशाअल्लाह.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الذين يأكلون الربا لا يقومون إلا كما يقوم الذي يتخبطه الشيطان من المس، ذلك بأنهم قالوا إنما البيع مثل الربا وأحل الله البيع وحرم الربا، فمن جاءه موعظة من ربه فانتهى فله ما سلف وأمره إلى الله، ومن عاد فأولئك أصحاب النار هم فيها خالدون. يمحق الله الربا ويربي الصدقات، والله لا يحب كل كفار أثيم. إن الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وأقاموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة لهم أجرهم عند ربهم ولا خوف عليهم ولا هم يحزنون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وذروا ما بقي من الربا إن كنتم مؤمنين، فإن لم تفعلوا فأذنوا بحرب من الله ورسوله، وإن تبتم فلكم رؤوس أموالكم لا تظلمون ولا تظلمون. وإن كان ذو عسرة فنذرة إلى ميسرة، وأن تصدقوا خير لكم إن كنتم تعلمون. واتقوا يوما ترجعون فيه إلى الله ثم توفى كل نفس ما كسبت وهم لا يظلمون. صدق الله العظيم. As for those who devour interest, they behave as the one whom Satan has co-founded with his touch. Seized in this state, they say, buying and selling is but a kind of interest. Even though Allah has made buying and selling lawful and interest unlawful. Hence, he who received this admonition from his Lord and then gives up dealing in interest may keep his previous gains, and it will be for Allah to judge him. As for those who revert to it, they are the people of the fire, and in it shall they abide. Allah deprives interest of all blessing, whereas He blesses charity with growth. Allah loves none who is ungrateful and persists in sin. Truly the reward of those who believe and do righteous deeds and establish prayer and pay zakah is with their Lord. They have no reason to entertain any fear or grief. Believers, have fear of Allah and give up all outstanding interest if you do truly believe. But if you fail to do so, then be warned of war from Allah and His Messenger. If you repent even now, you have the right of the return of your capital, neither will you do wrong, nor will you be wronged. But if the debtor is in straitened circumstance, let him have respite until the time of ease. And whatever you remit by way of charity is better for you, if only you know. And have fear of the day when you shall return to Allah, and every human being shall be fully repaid for whatever good or evil he has done, and none shall be wronged.
Takbir. Takbir. Takbir.
Jazakallah khair, Zakaria. The purpose of our event is to help educate everybody on the Islamic perspective of finances and commerce, both theoretically and practically. Especially in the times that we live, it is extremely important that we understand what is and isn't acceptable in our day-to-day transactions, along with far larger matters, as well as how to practically approach all of this. So that's why I'm really happy to announce our speakers for tonight. On my left, we have Shaykh Harun. Shaykh Harun has pursued traditional Islamic education since 2018. During this time, he has studied various Islamic sciences under Dr. Shadi Al-Masri, Shaykh Muhammad Daniel, Dr. Muhammad Abdullah Al-Azhari, and most notably, Shaykh Zuhair Qazan, with an emphasis on the study of Sharia. Shaykh Harun has presented his knowledge on Islamic rulings related to cryptocurrencies at the International Maliki Madhab Conference held in Algeria. He is an accountant by trade and currently is an instructor at Markaz Imam Malik and Darul Fat Seminary. On my right, we have Shomail Malik, a highly accomplished individual who has made significant contributions in the field of real estate and authoring. He is a 3-time Amazon best-selling author and has been featured in prestigious media outlets such as USA Today, Yahoo Finance, A&E, Reuters, and the Wall Street Journal. In his capacity as a managing partner at Apex Capital Group, Shomail has successfully completed over 650 real estate deals, raising over $75 million in private capital. He operates several businesses, including Apex Title Group, the REI Bros Real Estate Profit Machine, which is a seminar and education company teaching real estate investing, Dispo Beast, and Roof King NJ. Shomail holds a bachelor's degree in economics from Rutgers University with a minor in cell biology. He further went on to graduate with honors from the Executive MBA program at Rutgers Business School. He currently resides in the Princeton NJ area with his wife and 3 children. To begin, I'd like to hand off the mic to Shaykh Harun.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على سيدنا محمد صلاة تخرجنا بها من ظلمة الوهم وتكرمنا بها بالفهم وتوضح لنا بها ما أشكل حتى يفهم أنك تعلم ولا نعلم وأنت علام الغيوب ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله السميع العليم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله السميع العليم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله السميع العليم وبعد. First off, before we start, I want to thank everyone who put in the work to organize this conference. Usually what goes on the back end, we don't see and we don't realize how much work goes into these things. So we thank those people, as the Prophet ﷺ teaches us, those who do not thank the people have not thanked Allah. And also I want to say, I'm honored to be here in front of everyone, to present a little bit of what I've learned with everyone here today. And also it's an honor to speak alongside Shomail, someone who is very respected, mashallah, in the community, and someone I've looked up to since I was in college. I don't know if he knows this, but your name was known from a while ago, mashallah. I don't know.
20 years.
SubhanAllah. For me, it's like 10. Well, no, not 10, 8. 10, 8. طيب. So, an introduction to Islamic commerce law. When we talk about Islamic finance, this term that comes up, Islamic finance. Okay, so we have a word called finance, and then Islamic in front of it. So what makes it Islamic? Right? What makes finance Islamic? What makes it Islamic is that it is in accordance to the laws that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet put place. Otherwise, what's after that is just straight up finance. Right? What changes finance to be Islamic finance is that it is finance in accordance to the law, the sacred law. So if we want to understand, what is halal, what is haram in Islamic finance, then we need to understand the law that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us. And so this is what we learn in what's called the science of Yeah, you could, yeah, let's do that. Very good. Okay? So, we have a word that I just introduced called Islamic law, or we would call in Arabic fiqh, or we would call sharia. Okay? So what is fiqh? Very simply, we don't want to get into the details of it. Very simply, fiqh is to know the laws which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed or made obligatory upon us to know, which relate to actions, which relate to our actions. Okay? Next slide. And when we look at Islamic law, we have four main divisions of it. We have ritual law, family law, commerce law, and criminal law. For the most part, all of the rulings that we have in the deen fall under these four broad categories. So ritual law, everything having to do with the prayer, zakat, saum, hajj. Family law, marriage, divorce, everything related to families, right? Whose spending is obligatory upon, these kind of things. Commerce law, okay, which is what we're going to speak about, or an introduction to it, and criminal law. Alright? So, if we look at how Islam looks at the law in general, okay, before we get to commerce law, we want to look at Islam's theory, or how the Sharia looks at law in general. We start with Ibn Khaldun. Everyone here knows who Ibn Khaldun is, I hope. Right? If you don't, you should know who he is. For the Muslims, he's a big figure. Okay, he's a big figure, and he's considered to be the father of sociology, but he was also a very big Muslim judge. He was a scholar of Sharia as well. Okay, he has a huge history of the, history book, History of the World, which starts with one volume talking about sociology and these kind of things. Ibn Khaldun says that humans by nature desire to live in civilization and society. From that, we ask the question, what builds up a society, what builds up a civilization, right? It's built upon the families. It's built upon families. And for this reason, we have certain laws which regulate how is it that families come about and what happens between the family dynamics, because the society is made up of families. This is a long discussion that we'll leave for later. Once we have the society which is built up from families, what do we have then? Next. We have people interacting with each other. Okay? So we have people who are interacting with each other who came up through families, who made a society. When people interact with each other in a society or a civilization, their interests will collide with each other. Okay? And this is the reason why Allah needs to come to regulate those interests. Okay? When you want to live in a civilization and you want to act upon it and you want to earn things and you want to move around, interests between people will collide. And the point of Allah to come down, right, a qanun, a law, is to regulate this. Okay? And then from this, we see that when injustices and harm inevitably happen, there needs to be consequences. And that's why we have criminal law as well at the end, to deter this. Okay, so the idea is that we have ritual law which corrects the relationship between the slave and his lord, or her lord. Okay? The point is that the first barrier between you doing wrong in the society is your relationship between you and Allah. Which is why we need a society which is built upon people who are practicing. Then from there, okay, that's from the perspective of the individual. However, from the perspective of how we build a society, it's through families. And the second thing which will stop you from committing injustices is your family. Okay, and even if injustices happen, right, they can be mediated through the family before they get to judges. Okay, these are some important things to know. And then after that, we have interests of people colliding with each other, and so we need a law to regulate that. And then if all else fails, if you are not religious enough to hold to the sacred law, and the family isn't going to stop you, meaning that you're not worried about ruining your family name, or you're not able to listen to your family's advice, these kind of things, well then we have a criminal law that is put in place for such people. Okay. From that, we have a very important question. And it is, what is the cord that moves? Oh, back. What is that? What is the cord that moves society? Right? So when we see that interests are colliding between people, and people are moving in a certain direction, the law is there. What's the point of the law? It's there to regulate that and to force a certain context upon a society. Okay? Why is it that people, when they drive with their seatbelt on? Right? Because it's safe. But how did we get there? How did we get to this idea of safe driving? There had to be Allah to put that in place. Until Allah came, nobody wanted to do it. Right? Very simple. The law is there to force you into a context. Right? And the law is the cord that moves the society in a specific way. So it regulates the exchanging of interest in according to what is just. Okay? So when people's interests are regulated, or the way that they're acting upon exchanging interest between each other, when that is regulated, that's what moves society in a certain direction. So there is something now that when we have an Islamic law on commerce, there is somewhere that Islam is trying to take us to in society. Okay? From there we go to the next slide. What does it mean to exchange interests? The first. Okay. So you seek out, what does it mean to exchange interest between people? This comes from the idea of kasb in Islamic law, which is that you seek out what belongs to others for yourselves. Okay? That's what it starts with. When you're living in a society, there will be things that other people own, and you want it for yourself. Okay? This must be done in a way which is ethical and does not cause harm to other people. Or else we have chaos. And then, when we look at acquiring things, this is done by compensation or not. Meaning that there are two ways to acquire things in society. Either you give something in return, or by another means, which I'll get to some examples. If it is by compensation, then it's by compensating either an object or a benefit, or through partnership. And through this, right, most of the different contracts that are found in Islamic law, which by extension is what you find in Islamic finance, it comes back to one of these three things. That's why I'm taking you through this. Okay? So, what does it mean to offer an object as compensation? Bartering, right? You have a phone, I have a laptop. Let's say they're of equal value, or whatever it is, right? I want your phone, okay, and you want my laptop, so we trade it. No problem. Very simple, okay? And this has a specific type of rules in Islam. The object is either going to be money or another non-money object, you could say. If it's money, then there are different rules for that, and if it's another object, then there are rules specific to that. Or it's a benefit. For example, an employee, right? What is an employee giving for money? I want your money. You go to an employer, I want your money. That's what's happening, right? Nobody, unless you guys go to work for fun. Right? No one goes to work for fun, right? You want the money that is in the hands of the employer. Okay, how are you going to get that money? You're going to steal it? No, this causes harm. You're going to offer services. You're going to work. This is what we call an employee today. In Arabic, we call it ijab, which comes actually from the word rent. It's as if you're renting your time. You're renting your time out for money. Okay? Or a benefit, right? That's the benefit, right? You're giving them a benefit. Okay? Or I want to live in a certain house. I don't want the house. I want to live in that house. I want a benefit from that house. I want a benefit from that house, so I give you money for it. A different type of rent contract. Okay? Or you have partnership. Two people get into a partnership together, one person puts up the money, the other person does the work, or they split the work evenly. All of this, there are many different types of contracts under this. You have sharika, mudaraba, aqtirad, these kind of things, which you might, some might be familiar with them. From there, or we have the other, we go back to when you acquire something without compensation. This is good. Alright, we have zakat, gifts, endowments, restoring that land, and inheritance. These are some examples. So zakat is something which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made obligatory, so that the poor people can, or the people, the categories that Allah mentions in the Quran, they can be funded. And there's many different types of zakat. Zakat is not easy. Everyone thinks it's just the 2.5%. There's actually many more rules to that. It's not just on your savings for a year. If you're in business, for example, right, if you have inventory that you're constantly trading, there's a whole separate law of zakat for that. Right? So one who gets into business and has inventory and these kind of things, it's obligatory for them to learn those laws. Or for example, if someone mines gold, right, there's a specific zakat on that, which is 20%. Right? It's not even 2.5%. On crops, certain crops are zakatable, right? Those crops are, the zakat on them is 10% if it meets all of the conditions. Right? So there's many things that play in zakat. Gifts, people can gift each other, and there's actually conditions for a valid gift. Okay? Like someone came up to me once and they said, I want to take a riba loan, or I want to collect riba. I want to collect interest. But I don't want to call it interest. I don't want to call it riba. So instead, why don't I'm working for the person, I'm a consultant for them, right? And I give them some money, and they're giving the money back, and they give me something else, which is a gift. Is that okay? Okay, no, this is a trick, of course, right? This is an invalid gift. Okay? Endowments are big in Islam. This is a big source of financing for public, services, hospitals, schools. In the early days, in the history of Islam, these things were financed by endowments. And this goes back to that first category of Islamic law, which is based off of ritual law. When you have a religious populace, then the people themselves will establish things which benefit society. Because they are more invested in the akhirah than in this dunya. See? And then restoring that land is another interesting, unique example of how to acquire something, right? If you have land which is not usable, the country, the Islamic government, may put it up. Anyone who comes and develops this land, they can keep it for free. Right? And this is one way that people were able to acquire new wealth. And inheritance, right? You didn't give anything to inherit from someone else. Okay? When we acquire something for an object, okay, we're going to zoom in a little bit more. So we started from high view, what is Islamic law? Of course, that should have been a lecture by itself. I kind of sped through it. Acquiring something for an object. It can be done in one of three ways. Either both objects are gold, silver, or currency. And this is what we call sarf, currency exchange. There's rules for that. Or both objects are not, meaning there are something other than gold, silver, or that which takes their place. Then those have their own specific rules. Or we could say that there are certain prohibitions that don't apply to this. And the third is that one of the objects is gold, silver, or currency. Right? We don't trade with gold and silver today. We use cash. So cash takes the place of gold and silver. And the other is not. And the other is something other than cash. Okay? And all of these have their own specific rules to them. And we get to the slide that the foundation for all Islamic commerce law is understanding sales. Right? We can go back there. We can stay there for a second. Alright. The sales contract is the foundation for all of Islamic law when it comes to commerce law. If you understand the sales contract and the conditions of it and how it works, after that, anything can be explained to you. You can understand any other contract. If you don't understand this, there's no shot that you will understand anything else. Because it just gets more complicated from here. Every other contract after the sales contract is some sort of variation of it. Okay, so that's why we're going to focus on today, the sales contract. Okay, so I have here some ayahs which put forth the foundations for how Islam wants us to look at money, business, trade, these kind of things. وَهُوَ الَّذِي جَعَلَكُمْ خَلَائِفَ الْأَرْضِ وَرَفَعَ بَعْضُكُمْ فَوْقَ بَعْضٍ دَرَجَاتٍ لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ فِي مَا آتَاكُمْ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made you successors in the land, okay? And basically that He is the one who gave you the wealth that you have. So all of the wealth that is on the earth belongs to Allah. And Allah gave you that wealth. And Allah made it possible for you to attain your wealth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing you, what are you going to do with it? Okay? This is very important. And then, this ayah explains the previous one, specifically where it says, وَأَنْفِقُوا مِمَّا جَعَلَكُمْ مُسْتَخْلِفِينَ فِيهِ. And spend, right? And spend from that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made you a mustakhlif, right? He made you a successor to it. That what Allah gave you, spend from it. Meaning spend from it in the ways which Allah made permissible and halal and that He recommended. Right? And another foundational ayah, وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعِ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. And this is why we start with the sales contract. Sale in Arabic is bay'. Okay? So we start with the sales contract. Bay' here, in this ayah, is more general than just the sale. It's referring to any contract involving money or trade, which is halal. Okay? So that's why we call it the chapters of buyur. If anybody studies Islamic law in a traditional way, they will study the chapters on Abwab al-Buyu', the chapters of sales. Alright, actually that's not a good translation, maybe trade. Then they say, Abwab al-Buyu' wa ma shakalaha, and those which are similar to them. Okay? And then some make a joke, they say, wa ma shakiliha, which, you just put the kasra on the bottom and you call it problems. Because this is a problematic section which is very hard for people to understand. Right? So they make a joke on that. وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made riba haram. There is a specific riba which we'll get to at the end of the presentation, and there's a general riba. Meaning that any contract which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made haram is a form of riba. Is a form of riba. So everybody thinks riba just interest and that's it, and I don't have to worry about anything else. No, that's not true. There's other ways that you can take advantage of people, that you can take other people's rights in Islam. It's not just that. There's much more than that. Okay. We get to the goals of the Sharia in commerce law. The next slide. Right. The maqasid of the Sharia in this chapter, or in this type of law. Three main maqasid, three main objectives. Promoting the circulation of wealth in the society such that not a few amount of people hold all of the wealth and then they can just dictate what happens in society. Right? This is one of the reasons why something could be haram or obligatory. Or to protect the weak. And from this an interesting question comes. Is the point of the law to defend the truth or defend the weak? Okay? And at first thought one might think that it's there to protect the truth. However, the truth doesn't need protecting if people are strong. Only the weak need protecting. Okay? So from this, right, one of the goals of Islam in commerce law is to protect the weaker side. To protect people from being taken advantage of. And to promote brotherhood between the Muslims. What does that mean? That we all sing together, kumbaya, and we hold hands and we come? No, that's not what it means. What it means is to avoid disputes. This is why, right, if you have a contract between two people, the Quran tells you to write it down and to have a witness. Why? So that disputes don't happen later. Simple example, right? There's a type of contract that is called wadi'ah, right? You leave something with something else, with someone else. Like you're leaving for a year, so I ask someone, hold this money or hold this object for me for 1 year. Okay? So you're trusting them. If you do this, it's an obligation in Islam, and some said it's a recommendation, but strongly recommended, to have a witness to it and to write it down. Because when later you go to the judge, it's just your word against his. And the judge is not going to rule in your favor just because you accused someone. Because why? We say in Arabic, because the yad is yad aman. Because the person that you trusted, his hand or her hand is a hand of trust. You're the one who trusted that person. So it's your fault if anything happened and you didn't have a witness. Okay, and the fact that you didn't take the means to have a witness to see this written down and, perhaps even get it notarized. There's a type of notarization that would happen in the Muslim countries in the past. Then that's your fault. Okay, unless there's a proof. Unless there is a proof. So the burden of proof will be upon the one who is making that claim. However, Islam is coming to try to avoid all of this. So write down your contracts. Write down your agreements. It's not, we're brothers, we're not going to disagree. It's fine. No, it's not fine, right? A lot of people, when they get into trade with each other, especially family and friends, this is one of the main reasons why families cut ties between each other, right? And I know, it's tax season right now, I have clients coming in all the time, right? And part of my job is just listening to everyone's problems. And everyone talking about their family, and they did this to me and that and this. SubhanAllah, if you just wrote everything down from the beginning and agreed, right? And had everything done beforehand, you wouldn't have these disputes and your ties would not be cut between family and friends. So Islam is trying to avoid that. On any particular issue in which something is haram, most of the time you can bring it back to one of these three reasons, or why something is obligatory. And it could be one reason, 2 reasons, or 3 of them, all 3 of them. It doesn't have to be all 3. Okay? And there's a specific procedure in which these scholars go through for that. Next slide. That's a little bit of high view. I summarized it too much. Maybe I over-summarized. But really, everything that I just said is actually like a good 3 to 4 lectures of prep. That's what it should be. To really understand it in detail. Okay? But we get to the meat of today's talk, which is the legal framework for contracts before we get into the sales contract. Okay? Any contract, any sales contract, there are 3 pillars of the contract which must be respected, which I'm going to introduce. This means if one of these pillars is not there, you don't even have a contract. We don't even call it a contract to begin with. It's something else. Okay? 3 main pillars, according to the majority of scholars. And there's what we would call in Arabic, shurut luzum. Conditions of bindingness. That if certain things happen, the contract is now enforceable, we would say. It's now obligatory upon you to fulfill that contract, if these conditions are there. And as like a side note, this concept over here is actually a very deep concept, which scholars wrote whole books about. And it's actually said that, some French historians have said that when Napoleon went back from Egypt to France, this is one of the points of law that Napoleon benefited from the Muslim law, because of how detailed it was. Doesn't mean they copy and pasted everything, but the non-Muslims read it a lot and they benefited a lot from it. And it was very detailed. The Muslims wrote a lot in this. And it's a very significant portion of Islamic law. And the last one is conditions of validity. Meaning that if these things are not there, the contract is not valid. So a contract can be valid, but it's not binding. Meaning that if either side wants to back out, they can back out. And some contracts, right, they're valid and they're binding. Right? That's what you need to know. Okay? So now we come to the pillars of a sale. The first one is the wording. In Arabic we would call it a sigha. And the second, the 2 contracting parties. So the seller and the buyer. And the third is the object of the contract, which is 2 things. Right? The thing which you are buying and the price you're paying for it. Right? So in the summary, it's 3 conditions. In details, it's actually 5. Some of the you can click 3 times. Yeah. Some of the scholars, just for in case anybody studies this with anyone else, some scholars said that only the wording of the contract, the formulation of the contract, is the only condition, and everything else brings it into existence. Okay. So those are the basic pillars of the sale, and we're going to get into the details of it. So the wording of the contract. We have the conditions of validity. The first one is, or what does it mean to have what's called a sigha? They define it as that which indicates to consent. That which indicates to consent. That is what's considered the formulation or wording of the contract. So, in order to have a valid contract, both sides need to consent. How do I know that each side consented? Either by a statement, a clear statement, that which takes the place of a statement, or an action. So, very simply, right? I come, what's your name, brother? Ibrahim. I come to Ibrahim. You have this phone. I tell you, I would like to buy this phone for X amount. And you say, I accept. Okay? That's called the offer and acceptance of the contract. Right, so I made an offer and he accepted. Or he made an offer and I accepted. Either way it can work. Okay? So, where was I at? The wording of the contract, I was selling this to you or you were buying it from me, whatever it is. Anyway, it has to indicate to consent to the contract. Okay? So for example, I cannot force you into a contract. And this is actually very detailed. One interesting point on this, right, is that if the other side was forced into the contract due to, for example, you're their neighbor, and you make life unbearable for them, and you kind of force them into selling their house at a low price and you go in and buy it. That is haram to do. There's no consent there. Right? This is an example of why these things are deep and important. Okay? So the conditions of validity, that which indicates to consent, knowing what the other party said or did. Okay? So if he said something but I didn't realize it, okay, and I just said I accept, and I had no idea that he offered me something, I just randomly said I accept for any reason, you cannot just go to a judge and try to get that contract enforced. Very simple. Alright, we'll go to the conditions of bindingness. We want clarity and significations. So if either side was not clear in what it is that they were offering or accepting, the contract is not valid. Right? In Islam, you have to be crystal clear in the way that you do things. Okay? The next one is agreement in offer and acceptance. So what I was saying about before, right? And the third one, that the acceptance be in the same setting as the offer. Same setting as the offer, this doesn't mean that we have to be sitting with each other. So for example, you're on a website and you add some items to your cart and you click OK. What do you have here? You have the seller was offering goods and you've read and you know what you want to buy and you add things to your cart. You've done some actions indicating to consent and you press the word OK and you confirm. Alright, now let's say your card doesn't work. Okay, processes and everything. So you accept, so when they're offering things, you accept and they accept your accepting of the offer. Like everything gets processed and it goes through. Then you call up your credit card company and you have them cancel the card so that it doesn't actually hit. Is that permissible? No, it's not permissible. Right, just like a contemporary example of how these things can come to play. It's actually much more detailed than this, but I'm just trying to give simple, modern examples that we can understand what is it that these scholars are trying to tell us here. Okay. On the next slide, we have Surah An-Nisa. This ayah tells us, basically, right, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, right? O you who believe, La ta'kulu amwalakum baynakum bil batil. Don't wrongfully consume each other's wealth. So we come back to this idea that, right, in a society, people are trying to consume each other's wealth. However, Allah is telling you, don't do it in a way which is wrong. Then He says, إِلَّا أَن تَكُونَ تِجَارَةً عَن تَرَاضٍ مِنْكُمْ. The only way that you can take someone else's wealth is by consent, through valid forms of trade. This is one of the foundational ayahs for what I just mentioned. And then the scholars go on and they speak in details. Now we go to the two contracting parties. So we have the conditions of validity. The first is the ability to discern. Okay, the ability to discern. Meaning that the ones who are entering the contract, that they are in a sound state of mind. So for example, right, someone who is drunk. Right? It's haram, of course, to get yourself drunk. But just because he did something haram, does that mean I can go and play tricks on him and take all his wealth and make him agree to selling all of his property for $1? No. Okay? Otherwise, what would happen? Right? Evil people would go and they would get other people drunk in society and do this. So the Sharia stops this from the beginning. Right? Another condition or like format of ability to discern is that one reached the age of puberty and that they're able to discern between what they are doing. So for example, you sell something to a child. That is not an enforceable contract. It's valid because they're able to discern. So for the child, they're able to discern. However, as you will see, you can click conditions of bindingness. We have reaching the age of moral responsibility, being financially responsible, not being coerced, owning the item for sale. So, if you're a child who has not reached the age of moral responsibility, but you're able to discern, meaning you understand, the concept that things have value to it, what $1 is, these kind of things, you can sell to such a child. However, that contract is not binding, meaning that if the parents, the guardians, they come back to the seller and they tell you, hey, I don't agree to this, then you can return. You have to return things. This is why a 17-year-old in America, right? There's something similar in Western law. In America, if you're 17, you cannot go to a car dealership. They will not sell you the car. Big ticket items, they will not sell it to minors. Why? Because the parents of that minor can go and invalidate the contract. It's similar in Islamic law. Okay? So, being financially responsible as well. So, if someone is foolish with their money, right, they're what's called a safih, and that would be determined by the judge. And even if they're older, they cannot act on their own wealth without the permission of their guardian. Someone who's just foolish. Are majority of college students today foolish or not? Allahu A'lam. Right. When we learned this, the Shaykh, he told us, are all of you here foolish or not? I don't know. Like, would the scholars consider you all sound and responsible with your money if they saw what you were doing? Everyone needs to look at themselves and answer. Not being coerced. Now, this is an interesting part to get into the mind of the scholars and how they operate. Not being coerced into a contract is a condition of bindingness. but it's not a condition of validity. Why would that be the case? Right? If someone is doing things to try to coerce someone into a sale, why would the scholars not say that, or why would Islam not say that this contract is just invalid from the start? Well, we also have to live in reality. The reality is that someone might be in a situation where they just need to get out of that situation in any way, shape, or form. So the contract is valid, meaning that they can take the money, right, even if it's a lot less than what they should have done and they didn't consent really. And they can go and they can establish themselves. Then years later, they can come back and go to the judge, right, and try to get their rights back. So that's what it means, that it's a condition of bindingness, but not it's a condition of bindingness, but it doesn't make the contract invalid. Right? Some of the nuance here now. And that you actually own the item that is for sale. Meaning that if you are trying to sell something which you do not own, and the person who is buying that item figures that out, they can invalidate the contract. They can say, oh, I don't want it. Right? So for example, right, in Egypt, this would happen, right? If you try to go to a bookstore and buy a book, and you ask them, do you have this book in stock? And you don't know where it is, because over there the bookstores are like, it's 50 together in a couple blocks. So the seller, he knows where to find that book. So he'll say, yeah, I have the book. It's this much. Let's just say $20. Just wait here, I'm going to go get it from my storage, from the warehouse. Sometimes what they would do is they would actually go next door or to the store that was actually selling it, and then they would buy it and come back and sell it to you, because they know how much they're selling it for. So when you come out, right? Actually, this happened to me. This trick almost happened to me. I stood inside, he went outside, and then I saw him walking, so then I went outside. I just wanted to see where he was going to go. Then I caught up with him, I said, actually, never mind. I agreed to the sale, but it's not binding. Why? Because he doesn't own it. Right? It's valid, but up until, I can invalidate the entire contract, because he didn't own it. Okay? Now we come to the object. The object of the transaction, meaning what are we trading here? So the conditions of validity, we have purity, having permissible use, permissibility of ownership, permissibility of sale, both parties having the ability to deliver the object of the contract to each other. And that both parties have knowledge of the objects which are in the contracts. So, in order to have a valid sale based off of the object itself, it must be pure, meaning that it cannot, alcohol is considered najasa, it's considered filth. So you cannot sell alcohol, okay? Or anything else which is considered najasa, filth. It must have a permissible use. So for example, a musical instrument. A musical instrument, you cannot sell. Why? It does not have permissible use. Likewise, it must be permissible to sell. So there are things which it's allowed, permissibility of ownership. So for example, a live pig. You're not allowed to own that, so you cannot sell it. And it must be permissible halal to sell. So for example, the Prophet ﷺ prohibited the selling of dogs, even if they're hunting dogs. So you can acquire a hunting dogs, and there's ways in Islam that you can acquire one if you need it. Right? However, you're not supposed to buy it, because the Prophet ﷺ prohibited this. And that both parties have the ability to deliver the object to each other, and that both parties have knowledge of what's being exchanged. So for example, very simply, right? What do they call it? Those storage units, when people leave them and they just sell whatever's inside of here, you can, everybody bids on it. That's not permissible, because you don't know what you're buying. You have to know exactly what it is that you're buying. Right? So if I go to buy a phone, I need to know what's the data on the phone, or how much storage it has. What is the color of the phone? These kind of things, I have to know it, or else the sale is not permissible. This is to prohibit what's called gharar, speculation or uncertainty in sales. Okay? And people use the word gharar a lot, but they don't understand what it means. Right? So like one of the things is that some said that Bitcoin is haram to trade because there is uncertainty in it. Actually, there's no uncertainty. There's uncertainty in what it will be worth tomorrow. But when I want to buy $20,000 one bit, or whatever it is now. Yeah, it's like 19 now. $19,000 or less than that. Whatever it is. $15,000, one Bitcoin. I know what it is that I'm buying. I'm buying one Bitcoin. That's what it means to know what it is you're buying. what it's going to be worth in the future, these kind of things, has nothing to do with it. So for example, some say, like, day trading is haram because of uncertainty. There's no uncertainty. When I day trade, right? I'm not saying that I encourage it. We're just talking about what's halal and haram. Halal doesn't mean you should do it. It's just saying that you're not going to hell for it. Not that you're definitely going to hell. It means that you don't deserve to be punished for it. Okay? That's what it means. Not being deserved to be punished for it doesn't mean it's a good idea to do. Anyway, someone is day trading, right? Well, at each trade in the day, they know exactly what stocks they're buying, what stocks they're selling, and exactly for how much. So, for that reason, it's a valid trade. Okay? That's what uncertainty means. That's what gharar means. Alright? We don't have too much time left. But, this ayah is one of the evidences for Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu awfu bil uqud. O you who believe, fulfill your contracts. Meaning, once a contract is valid, fulfill them. Right? I want to take a quick dive into looking at American law. In America, anyone who's studying business law, they will study this, right? A contract which is binding in American law has these conditions. So you have to have an offer and acceptance. There's a similarity here, right? Consideration, intention, legality, it must be legal, similar to what we said about the object, and capacity. This consideration refers to the object itself. And capacity, meaning that you have the ability to make decisions for yourself. If these things are not there, in American law, it's not a binding contract. And from this, I want to go into this small tangent on the effects of Islamic law on Western law. Alright, so we have one of the French historians, he mentions that Napoleon, which I said before, he took from the law books that he took back, he took a few law books back from Egypt to France. And he built a law after that. And these books, he studied them, right, and he benefited from them. It's not to say that French law is all Islamic law, that's nonsense, right? The entire philosophy is different. But the point to say is that, these things actually contributed to the building of the West. Okay? And he continues, this historian Labon, he mentions that the things which he heavily relied upon from these books are some of the rulings themselves. Alright, some of the rulings themselves, he kind of just thought it was a good idea, so they copy and pasted it. And this is very obvious if you try to compare them. On contracts, meaning the different types of contracts. So agency contracts, for example, there's a big similarity between Western law and Islamic law. Right? This is one of the things which, the concept of that you have a fiduciary duty to the one who is making you an agent. Same thing in Islam actually, or very similar in Islam. That if you're an agent for someone else, you must do what is in the best interest of the one who is, trusting you. And there's a bunch of other conditions, there are rules around that. Obligations and ownership. So obligations here, what's meant by obligation, right, the translation is, the idea that things can be binding upon you. Commitments. Right? When does something actually become a commitment? Okay. And the different types of ownership that exists. So public and private property and these kind of things. Okay. So we have 5 minutes left. We're going to try to do a quick introduction to riba. Of course, this is an issue which, when I studied it, it took us 8 or 9 lessons. Each lesson was more than an hour. So it's a very in-depth topic. But this is one of the ayahs, and just to save time, I'm going to go through it quick. This is one of the hadiths reported in Muslim, which is one of the foundations for the prohibition of riba. That gold is to be paid for gold, silver with silver, wheat with wheat, barley with barley, dates with dates, salt with salt, same quantity for same quantity, equal for equal, hand to hand. Meaning that it must be done on the spot. And if these differ, then you may trade as you wish, so long as it's done on the spot. This hadith and other hadiths and other ayahs of the Quran from this, the scholars took that riba in the Arabic language means increase. To have an increase. Increase can be done based on this hadith and others. It can be done based off of the object in the contract itself. So I trade, for example, 5 pieces of gold for 6. So there's an increase there. That's not allowed. Or in time. So for example, I trade you 5 pieces of gold for 20 pieces of silver. But you give me the silver in a year. That's not permissible. Right? From this we have 2 types of riba, which are, the first one is called riba al-fadl. And very quickly, it is to exchange a good for a different quantity of the same good. Meaning from the categories which the Prophet ﷺ mentioned in the hadith. So gold with gold, silver with silver, or that which takes their place. So cash for cash. Okay? And the other foods that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, there are foods which are called ribawi foods. And there's details on that. It's not too relevant to us today, unless you're in something very specific. Riba al-fadl is prohibited on gold and silver, and that which takes their place. So, I cannot give you like $5 for $5 for $6 on the spot. What you can do is currency exchange. So $5, 6 euros. You can do it in any quantities you want. $5, give me 100 euros. No problem. However, it has to be hand in hand, meaning on the spot. There cannot be any delay whatsoever. Alright, so if you're foolish enough to take that offer, alright, Islam's not going to prohibit you from that. Okay? Then the next is riba nasi'a, right? And it is to exchange a good for another when both items are not exchanged in the right way, regardless of whether the quantities of each good are the same. Okay? So, I give you $100 today, you give me $120 in a year. This is what we all generally understand to be riba. But as you see, there are different types and many different rules around it. It's always haram in gold and silver and that which takes their place. Meaning, money. Okay? And perhaps even cryptocurrencies as well. This was part of my research, right? Do cryptocurrencies take the place of gold and silver? That's a long discussion as well. Actually, one of the major scholars in the world, one of my teachers, he actually asked him about Bitcoin after doing this research and everything, and he brought everything up to him. And he answered the question based off of the conditions of a valid sale, to show you how important those items are. Of course, it's something that's much more detailed than what I presented, but just to see how central it is to many contemporary issues. Alright, riba nasi'a is haram in all foods, no matter what. Okay. Now we have an important principle. An important principle, and it is every loan in which the lender derives a benefit is considered riba. Alright, so I give you $2,000. You give me $2,000 back and work for me in my store for a week. Riba. For example, right? Any kind of benefit that you derive whatsoever is considered riba. Even Imam Abu Hanifa radiallahu anhu, when he made a loan to his neighbor, he was afraid to walk from under the tree and take shade from it, because maybe his neighbor would not like that he would be benefiting from the shade of his tree. However, his neighbor would be shy to tell him no because he gave him a loan. And so then it would be riba. Of course, this is a level of piety that he went to, but just to show how much, loans are done for the sake of Allah. You're not supposed to be taking any benefit from it except for reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the idea behind loans in Islam. Of course, we'll wrap up here. I had a few more things to share, but we're running out of time. I hope it was not too fast-paced, and I hope that this, inshallah, this presentation piqued people's interest and saw that there are things that we need to learn. And maybe there's specific areas that you saw that you're interested to learn more in. Inshallah, now you have the tools to go and do that. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi. I will continue a little bit. Shomail very graciously gave me a little bit extra time, inshallah. So, that principle, every single loan in which there's a benefit derived from, that is considered riba. Just for full disclosure, there's a hadith, a narration of the Prophet ﷺ, which is along these lines. Right? However, this hadith is very weak. Most likely what happened, right, is the one who narrated this hadith, he was narrating a principle in Islamic law and mistaking it for a statement of the Prophet ﷺ. Regardless, based off of many other hadiths and ayahs, this principle came from those. Just so you understand where this comes from, right? When any principle of Islamic law, a legal axiom, a qaida fiqhiyya comes up in Islamic law, it comes up from looking at many different ayahs and many different hadiths to see what is the common denominator between them all, and we take a principle. The majority of Islamic contract law is built on this. So it's actually a big mistake that for every single point that's mentioned, where's the evidence? Give me an ayah of the Quran or a hadith. Actually, most of the evidences in these things, or many of them, are legal maxims, and the evidence for those legal maxims are ayahs of the Quran and hadiths. Just so you understand how things work. Okay? So, from this, I want to take a little fun case study, right? So we'll read it one by one. So Zayd wants to borrow $10,000 from Amr. And Amr wants to loan out the $10,000, however he would like to receive $11,000 in exchange for the loan. Next one. Since the two do not want to be involved in riba, they come up with an idea. Zayd offers to sell his dhikr beads, mashallah, right, to Amr for $10,000. So they're sitting together. Give me so imagine you're here, right? Imagine these are beads, right? You want to do this? I'm selling you this for $10,000. So now I have what? $10,000. He has the beads. Then Amr purchased the beads. Then Amr offers the beads that he took. However, he says, I'm going to sell these beads for $11,000, however deferred. So you take this and you come, I'm selling this for $11,000, however, I want the money after a year. So I go and buy it. So what happened? I have my object back, I have $10,000, and now I owe you $11,000. These kind of tricks, is this permissible in Islam? However, each of these contracts by themselves, they're permissible, right? I'm allowed to sell anything I want for any price. And I'm allowed to sell something in installments and for a deferred period of time, so long as I don't make it riba based. I don't say that if you're late, I'm going to charge you more, these kind of things. So these two contracts by themselves, they're halal. But I can take these things and put them together. And what have I done? I've effectively made something which in the words of it seems that it's halal. However, in reality, it's just a trick. It's just a trick that's played. And from that, we come to the last slide. I believe this is my last one. A general principle. And this is very important. And it is that in the Sharia, contracts, any contract that's brought to a mufti or a judge, they're going to look at more so to the meanings and the intent behind these contracts. And they are concerned with the words and the phrases that are used, but that's not the only thing that they're concerned with. And one of the things which I kind of want to end on, right? And while Islamic finance as a concept is a nice concept, Islamic finance in practice, right? We see some things happening in it, and unfortunately, I'm not saying all of it, however, there are parts of it, or some actors in it, which basically do this. And so, for anyone who wants to get involved in what's called Islamic finance, right, it's important that you understand the law, right? What did Allah and His Prophet made obligatory upon you to learn this, right? One of the great scholars, Ibn Jama'ah, he was asked by the people to write them a book, on spiritual enlightenment and these kind of things, how to get closer to Allah and all of these. So he went and he wrote them a nice little book, written in modern language, that talks about something similar to what I just gave, right? With giving practical examples. They said, you wrote me a law book over here. We want to get closer to Allah. What are you doing here? Right? They were upset. He said, when I saw that the dua of the one who what they consume from is not halal, is not accepted, and I saw your states and I saw that your contracts, what your dealings are, they are not permissible, this is the first step to your getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so it's very important that we don't take things for granted. We learn our religion, and if we're going to be involved in these things, we need to do it in a way which is correct and ethical and in lines with the philosophy of Islam. Not the philosophy of capitalism or communism or anything else, but we just change things up and we use certain tricks like the ones that you just saw, right? And technically it's fine, but it's built in the light or in the style of something which is foreign to Islam. This we want to stay away from. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. And inshallah now we'll get to the practical part with our dear brother.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh Harun, for the insights you have given us on the Islamic practical and legal approaches in a more financial and corporate setting. I will now hand the mic to Shomail Malik, who will talk more about the practicality of Islamic financial practices and the real estate world, inshallah.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum. How's everybody doing? This is overall a very heavy topic. It requires your attention and intentionality when you go into this, because it is an obligation on every Muslim that wishes to operate in business to know that the prerequisite is to know the rulings before you go into it. Not to be midway and then figure things out along the way. And my presentation is going to be, I'm going to sprinkle in some anecdotes, because the stuff that I'm going to be talking to you about, you'll see them on YouTube Shorts, you'll see them on Instagram Stories. These are, tactical ways to invest in real estate, but it's not taught in the halls and the classrooms of universities and colleges. And so, 2003 is when I graduated from Rutgers. I went into the pharmaceutical world, and I spent 11 and a half years in corporate America. In 2008, when Lehman Brothers crashed, this is, you guys probably don't remember it, but you're probably reading about it in your business classes. When Lehman crashed, it set off a domino effect of other banks crashing because they were over leveraged. They were partaking in something called subprime lending. And the reports started to come out that financial institutions that were operating with Islamic finance principles were the ones that not only survived during this period, but they also thrived, right? And this is how you know that the rulings and the boundaries that have been set are divinely guided, right? And given to us by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And on the surface, you may think, well, what's the big deal with interest? I give 10, somebody gives 11, nobody gets hurt along the way, right? Everybody's fine. We all go home and everything's fine. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it such a crime that He and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam will wage war against the person who partakes in this, right? In this transgression. And so a lot of people, they read it, they know about it, it's in the back of their mind, and then they carry on with life, and then they, participate in it. And when we went into this business of, you guys have watched HGTV, I'm sure, where they find a house, they flip it, they knock down the walls, do the kitchen and things like that. So we started doing that, but at scale, right? Like take that concept and then just put it on steroids. And then that's what we were doing. So I had my full-time job. I was in executive MBA at Rutgers Business School, and then running this business at the same time. Now, the first 4 years, I have my W-2 income. So it's very easy. I can take my money that I'm earning, I put it into these properties, we buy them in cash, and then what I would do is simply get a Qard Hasan, right? 0% interest loan, 0% interest loan from my father, and say, hey, let me borrow 100,000, 150,000. I have the other 100, I'm going to put it in, I'm just going to return your 150 back. Thanks for helping me out with the seed money, right? And my father was just obviously, against that, right? But depreciation, the property goes through wear and tear. I can depreciate the property over 27 and a half years for a residential property. Appreciation is the value of the property going up, right? So that's tied directly to the equity, which we talked about. And then number 3 is the taboo word, leverage. Leverage. Let's go to the next slide, inshallah. So I'm going to come back to leverage in a second. But these are the common strategies that are used in real estate investing. Number 1 is fix and flip. You've seen that on, Flip This House and all these other TV shows. Another one is buying and holding the properties. So in real estate investing, that's really the end game, is to play monopoly. How many properties can I, purchase over a certain period of time? And the way that we teach it in our workshops and seminars is that if you really want to be financially independent and you're looking at real estate investing as the tool, think of it this way. You, your wife, your kids, there's a certain amount of money that you spend every single month, right? Which is your monthly expenses between your housing or mortgage or rent, whatever you pay, your car payments, insurance and gas, groceries, Wi-Fi, your Xfinity, your cell phone bill, all of these things are your expenses, right? And as you're building a portfolio, we start to say that that is your passive income. That's money that's going to come to you from your tenants, right? And when you can 1.5 to 2x that against your expenses, when this exceeds your expenses 2 times or 1.5, you're essentially financially independent, right? You see all of these, Instagram stories, Facebook stories, all of that saying, hey, you should get financially independent. All of that stuff is so arbitrary. Do I need $1 million in my bank account? What does that mean? $1 million in New Jersey doesn't go too far, right? Not anymore, not with the inflation and all of that, right? So what I really need is a revenue stream that's coming to me without me having to work for it. And a good way to do it that real estate investors use is buying and holding rental properties. And then there are 4 ways that my peers use to get ahead in this. One is called the BRRRR method. The next one is called the 4x4 strategy. The next one is called house hacking. Have you guys heard of house hacking? It's like a very Gen Z millennial thing to do. I was doing that when I turned 23. I was doing this with a condo. The way that they teach house hacking, which I'll get into, it's an interesting concept. We'll get to that. And then the last one is syndications. Okay. So next slide. This is how you raise capital to scale. So remember, when I go back to my personal story, the first 4 years I was doing all of this with my own money. Mamu, Chacha, my father, we just pool money together and I just give their initial capital back. And then in 2012, the night before Ramadan, like Taraweeh was going to be a couple of hours away of 2012. That night at like 6 p.m., like 2 hours before Isha, I held a dinner and I invited everybody from the ISCJ community, the Route 1 Masjid. I said, look, I've been doing this for 4 years. I bought this house. Look, we fixed it up. We sold it. We made $50,000 on this one. Bought this house, fixed it up, made $80,000 on this one. And now I've got this deal on Jefferson Street in New Brunswick, right by Rutgers. And I might be able to sell it to Rutgers. Rutgers might be my buyer, actually, because they buy properties in the 6th Ward of New Brunswick. But I have other buyers as well. We're going to go in, we're going to fix it, and we're going to sell it. So anyway, long story short, this was at the time, a big deal for me. We bought the property for $150. We put $50,000 into it. 2 months and 23 days we were in and out, and we sold the property for about $123,000 profit. Now, the people that were there at the dinner, I said, okay, the minimum investment is X amount, $10,000, right? Or $25,000, whatever it was at that time. We're going to pool our money together, and then you as the investors are going to get X% of the profit. We're partners in this. You're the capital partner, as the Shaykh was mentioning, and I'm going to be I'm going to provide the sweat equity, right? And we're going to be partners. What partners do, which is different than me borrowing the money from you and you being the lender and having an upper hand, is that we share risk. That if this deal goes backwards and it goes south and all of a sudden the market tanks, we both take a hit, right? I've lost time, I've lost reputation. If I had to put money in, I've also lost money, but you're also going to lose money as well. And you have to be okay with that, right? And so we came up with, a profit sharing model, which allowed us to then scale. And because we did good in that, right, this is where I say that this became the, what initially I thought might be a handicap, right, actually became our superpower. Because I found so many Muslims that were leaving $500,000, $700,000 in their bank account because they didn't want to touch the riba. They had already been burned in the stock market bubble of 1999-2000 when the dot-com bubble happened. You guys are too young. You probably read about it in your business class textbooks, right? We lived through it. And so these people had already been burned in the stock market. They didn't want to touch the stock market. And so we started offering real estate. Now, people have this mentality from back home. They're familiar with real estate. It's tangible. You can see it. You can touch it. You can go to the property. You can, it's there. And so people understand it, right? And there's an appeal to it because of HGTV and some of that stuff, right? They want to see a project come to life. So it became our superpower in that Muslims really started to invest in it to the point that we raised about $75 million in the community, right? Now, that's interesting because when profit is at stake, it's amazing how quickly we invest. But when we go to a fundraiser and the guy is like struggling, like 5,000, hey, anybody, 5,000? No? Okay, 2,500. And we're struggling. And yet I'm going to fundraisers, setting up my table outside of, on the side where the dinner is and things like that. And Uncle just leaving a $200,000 check with me, saying, I want to, I saw the email that you sent out, right? I want it, right? And I'm like, subhanAllah, Muslims have money, like crazy money. And and it's because we're good stewards of our money, right? They say that there's $9 trillion right now in qualified accounts, retirement accounts, $9 trillion. You guys know what the difference between million, billion, and trillion is? So, what's your name, brother? The North Face jacket? Duran? Adil. Adil, I go to you and I say, let's say I work for you. And I work for you at McDonald's. You're my manager, okay? And I say I want to take a 1,000,000-second vacation. You know how many days I'm gone for? 11 days, okay? And then I tell you that, look, I want to take a 1,000,000,000-second vacation. You know how long I'll be gone for? 32 years. And then I say, you know what? I'm loving this vacation time stuff. I want to take a 1,000,000,000,000-second vacation. You know how long I'll be gone for? 30,000 years. Okay? Difference between million, billion, trillion. There's 9 trillion in IRA accounts, right? And I forgot which one it was. I think it's Dalia Mujahid's organization that does research that Muslims are the second most affluent demographic in the United States. And then there's another one that I think it was done by Dinar Standard that shows that we're the third, right? Jews and Hindus being, right up there. Jews are the first. So anyway, I've started realizing that Muslims have a lot of money and that they understand real estate. They want to invest in real estate. So it was very easy for us to raise capital when we could show performance, right? Can I go to the next slide? So I'll talk to you guys a little bit about some of these strategies. So leverage. Remember that taboo word that was number 3, the third profit center? What does leverage do? If I am buying a property that's $100,000, we just go with easy numbers. $100,000, I have 2 options. I can either put all of my cash into the deal, and that's a cash deal, I'm a cash buyer, or I could partner with a financial institution, like let's say an Islamic mortgage company, okay? There's several of them out there. You can read the fatwa that was written up by Amja, and it's also been updated, and what they feel about these companies. But then you also have folks that belong to Amja who have also dissenting opinions. For example, one company is UIF, right? We work with them pretty extensively, but you'll see that Imam Zaid Shakir, Imam Omar Suleiman, all of them are advocates of UIF. Although Imam Omar, a lot of his teachers are from Amja, like Shaykh Hatem and others, right? So scholars have different opinions, and that's why Islamic finance is a very vast field, and you have to know who is well versed in it and who to follow also, okay? And you have to be comfortable with their knowledge and then, and seek the path that way, because they're the ones that have done ijtihad on this. So in any case, I can go to a financial institution and say, hey, you put up 75%, I'll put up 25%. So what's coming out of my pocket? $25,000. What's coming from the financial institution, the Islamic mortgage company? $75,000. And we're going into this deal. Now the contract could be written up depending on what the company is. If it's guidance, it's musharaka. If it's UIF, they use other contracts. They have ijara, they also have murabaha, right? But what leverage does is it allows you to do more with little, right? And that's why you guys remember this from physics class. You have a fulcrum, you have a lever. By yourself, you can't pick up the boulder. But if you put the boulder on a lever, you're able to pick that boulder up, right? Pick up that really heavy box. That's what leverage does in real estate as well. So let me explain that with some actual strategies. So in a rehab fix and flip, let me get this one out of the way because this is pretty straightforward. Your capital is finite, so how do I scale? If I can only do 3 or 4 by myself because I only have, let's say, 400,000 in the bank account, and each property is going to cost me 100,000 to do with renovations and purchasing it, I can only do 4. And then I have to wait for all of those to sell and get my profit out to do the next set. The other way to do it is to bring partners into the deal and say, okay, we'll do 50-50, or we'll do 70-30. This is my role, I'll do all of the work, this is your role, you'll be the silent partner. I pick what the color of the cabinets are, that we're going to use stainless steel appliance, it's all going to be LG, I don't care if you like Samsung, all of these things, right? We write all of this out in a contract, and it's all signed off by everybody who's making what. But there's also, what if we lose money, right? And that we share in the loss as well, right? And that's an easy way to do it. So now my limiting constraints become how much money can I raise, right? How quickly can I find properties to put that money into, and how well can I manage those projects? Because I don't want it to implode either, right? I could go really, really fast and grow really quickly, and the whole thing will just blow up in my face. So this is a very easy way to grow your business, is by bringing in a partner, a capital partner who's going to be a silent partner where you're doing the work. Okay, 50-50 for most people, right? In a joint venture type of a setup works really well. Okay, now that this is done, let's go to rental properties. Okay, some heavy math here. This is going to show you what leverage does. Arafat, you remember these, right? Arafat used to work with us. He used to do a lot of these spreadsheets. All right. So if you look at this, I just put a generic address here, 123 Main Street. And the purchase price is $800,000. We have to repair it and redo the kitchen and the bathrooms and all that stuff, $100,000. $900,000 is the total investment. There you see the rents. We have 6 units. It's a 6-unit apartment building. And it brings in $8,400 a month. So that means $100,000. We annualize all the numbers. It means the property brings in $100,000 per year, right? But we don't keep $100,000. We have some expenses. So those expenses are always going to be taxes, insurance. And then you have to decide who's paying the utilities. Now, if you're a savvy landlord, you're going to push those utilities onto the tenant and say that the utilities are your responsibility, and you're going to write your lease that way. That you pay the water, sewer, gas, trash, all of that is up to you. And then I'm going to have like this buffer for maintenance, because things break at rental properties. Generally speaking, tenants don't treat properties with the same level of pride and care that a homeowner is going to. So things are going to break. And usually rental properties are going to be older properties. So I'm putting some money aside, $500 per unit for that. So I count for $3,000 every year and $5,000 for vacancy. Like somebody doesn't pay me 1 month, and so on and so forth. So I build out this model. I have about $20,000 in expenses. I'm left with the net operating income, $81,400, right? I'm making $81,400 on a $900,000 investment. You guys see that? The numerator is what? $81,000. The denominator is $900,000. So simple math. If I invest $100,000 and each year it returns $10,000 in cash flows, what's my return on investment? 10%, right? 10,000 over 100,000. I had to put 100,000 out to get 10,000. Now look at what happens when I apply leverage on the other side. If I was to get 70% of the money loan to value from the bank, okay, and from a bank, right? I'm going to put aside for right now Islamic financing, or I'm just going to show you what leverage does. 900,000 is the value of the property. 630,000 is going to come from a financial institution. That 630,000 has something called cost of financing, right? They're not giving me that money for free. They're going to require a return on that. And that return is, you see where it says annual debt service, $40,584? That's my new expense. I now have a mortgage on this property. Before I didn't on the left side, because why? I bought it in cash. But now I've got a partner, which is a financial institution, and they're charging me a mortgage on this, right? And so what happens is, look at the math equation. The amount of money that I have in on the bottom, the denominator, has gone down significantly. You see what it is? It's estimated total out of pocket is now 285. It's no longer 900,000. What happened? We decreased the denominator by almost 67%, right? That's 1/3 the amount, 285. How much is coming in now? 40,000. The annual cash flow is 40,000. Before it was 81, now it's 40. I have that. And because I did that, leverage allows me to then have each dollar is now working harder, right? And that's what we call cash on cash return, right? This is a little bit rigorous with the math. But now my return went from 9% to 14%, okay? Now let me show you what people do out there. It's called the Burr method. Can you go to the next slide? I'm going to come back to this one because this is an easy way to do rental properties. It's very similar to actually rehabbing properties. So for example, my father, he did extremely well during COVID. Sold all his properties. He didn't want to deal with tenants. And then he said, okay, I have another problem. Like, okay, what is it? He said, I have all this money in the bank. What am I going to do with it? So I said, all right, why don't we do this? Why don't we have you partner with us on these townhouses that we're purchasing in South Jersey, and you'll get 50% and we'll get 50%. You put up the money, we will do all of the marketing to find these properties, renovate them, lease them, interview the tenants, collect the money. If any maintenance needs to be done, we'll handle all the sweat equity part of it. We'll be 50-50 partners, right? That's a very easy way to scale rental properties. Again, now what's my limiting constraints? How many people are willing to, buy into this model, and how many properties can I find? So I can make as much money as I want as long as I keep scaling this, right? As long as I keep finding properties and keep finding capital, I can keep scaling this. Okay, next slide. This is what they call the Burr method. If you YouTube this, if you Instagram this, this is all over the place. Every influencer talks about the Burr method, right? And then they sell you a course on the back end, like buy my course, $97, and then you go through this whole funnel and stuff. We do it too, actually. But in any case, you buy a property that needs renovations, right? You renovate it, and what that does is it forces appreciation, right? Like, brothers, like when you're like on your last few days of your haircut, and you're like, oh, I need to go to the barber, right? Your stock is down at that point, right? But as soon as you walk out of the barber shop with that, the clean cut and everything, your stock goes back up, right? That's what you're doing with properties. You're giving them a makeover, and it increases the value of the property. And then what happens is you rent it out, and then you go, this is what everybody does out there, right? They go to a bank and they say, okay, I bought this house for 100, I put 50 into it, it's 150, and now it's worth 200, right? Because the market went up, because I also forced the appreciation, right? The makeover thing. And the bank will give them 80%, up to 80% of that amount, right? Think about this. 80% of 200,000 is 160. How much do I have in this deal? If you were following the numbers, I had 150 in the deal. So 150 came back to me. I still own the property. And the money that came back to me, that extra 10,000, is tax-free. I don't pay taxes on it during a refinance. And on top of that, I have no money in the deal, and I own an asset that spits out cash, right? I'm making money on nothing invested. Remember, before I give you an example, I have 100,000 invested and I make 10,000. So what's my denominator now? 0. But I'm making money in the numerator. What's my return? Anything divided by 0 is what? It's infinite, right? So now I take that and I go buy another property with that same money that I used on this first one. This is called the Burr method. And you do it over and over and over again, okay? The next one, 5 minutes. Okay, 4x4, very simple. I have $100,000. Instead of buying one property, putting all my eggs in that one basket, God forbid the tenant loses their job or something, I have 100% economic loss. Instead, I take 100,000, I split it up into 25, 25, 25, 25. I go to guidance, or I go to UIF, and I say, hey, You guys put in the other 75. They qualify me. They do all their whole process. We buy 4 properties. And because of cash on cash return, my money's working harder. And then what I do is I take the cash flow from all 4 properties and accelerate the pay down of the first one and pay it off till I own it outright, right? And this is like a retirement plan that people can put into place. Rather than trusting your 401k and wherever your employer has it invested and going through the roller coaster of the stock market, you can control your own finances by employing a strategy like this. Let's go to the next one. I only have like 4 minutes left. House hacking. House hacking is a great way to own your first house. You buy a 3-family house, you live in one, you rent out the other 2, right? They're paying you rents, and if you bought it with a mortgage, then you are covering your mortgage with that. You can essentially live rent-free. The way that I did it was, I was 23 years old, so 2 years out of college. I bought 1236 Edpass Road here in New Brunswick. It was a condo. I would sleep on the dining room floor, right? Working at this pharmaceutical company. Dining room floor, just put out my comforters and stuff, put my pillow down, just sleep on the floor. I had IT consultants in the bedrooms paying me money. And the whole time that they're paying, right, and I got a loan from Guidance Residential for this property, right? So it was worth like $125, I think is what I bought it for. And eventually 2.5 years later when I sold it for about $165. So I made $40,000, and the whole time these guys were paying money. I had no expenses. I was living there for free, essentially. I was living on the dining room floor, but it was still for free, right? So I didn't have to say that I was living in my mom's basement. So that's house hacking. The way that people do it, the more common way of doing it is you have your own unit in a 3-family property, like you've been to Jersey City and other places where you have multi-family properties. You get one unit, they rent out the other units. Now, by the way, all of this, I don't have time to get into, can be done with Islamic financing. So I'm working with Shaykh Joe Bradford to draft the contract. And I'll tell you, the biggest challenge that I had was I started getting the heads of Guidance and UIF on the phone and saying, yeah, I love what you guys are doing. Give me your documents. Here's my email so that I could do this. And, let's do this with all the Muslims, right? They're like, yeah, see, that's the problem. We spend millions of dollars with, Mufti Taqi Uthmani and, this scholar and that, and all the legal and lawyer fees that we spent on these documents. The document set is our IP. That's our intellectual property. We can't just give that to you. So one of the projects that I'm working on with Sheikh Bradford is to have these documents available so that you can enact strategies like this and not have to worry about compromising your faith, right? Otherwise, that's how they funnel you back to them. Syndications is another way where you pool money. Like, let's say all of us, we get together, we buy this apartment building here for $250,000. It's 3 units. And every single one of us, based on our contribution, usually the way that it's split up is called a 2 and 20, right? And the way that they do it is that the sponsor, let's say I'm the one putting the deal together, so I know all of you, I get all of you into it. I'm the one that did all the due diligence and all the homework on the property, and I'm kind of leading the project. So I would get 20%, right? And 80% would go to you guys, right? And it would get split up based on whatever your pro rata contribution was to that deal. Okay, so that's what a syndication is. And this is how people buy, like, if you were seeing Grant Cardone, that's how he buys those 300-unit apartment complexes. He gets a lot of investors, accredited investors, to do that. Let's go to the next one. Okay, so that's my contact information. If you want to reach out, I'm always on WhatsApp. But with that, I'm done.
Jazakallah khair, Shomail, for your presentation on real estate and for clarifying several aspects and key points on investments and corporate practices. We will now be transitioning into the Q&A session. So please scan the QR code behind me and we will get started shortly.
So the question is, how in depth does the Sharia go in buying and selling? So every single pillar that I mentioned has conditions for it. We said conditions which make the contract binding and conditions which make the contract valid. I only mentioned some of them for each one, and each one of them has a lot of depth to it. And that's the basic fundamental version of a contract in Islam. Then depending on what you go to, things will change. So for example, different types of contracts, you have sharika or musharaka, which means two people, they come together and they pool their money together to go into like a joint venture or something like this, right? So there is now some questions, right? What if one of the two got their money from something which is haram? Is that allowed or no? There's some difference on this actually. And to what extent is that allowed? Is there allowed to be, are you allowed to partner with someone who got some of their money from haram and these kind of things? What are you allowed to partner to do? How should the risk be distributed between the two? So the contract, as Brother Shomail was mentioning, cannot be skewed so much to one side over the other. Right? One of the things is that if you are financing something or investing into something, you have to share some of the risk. That's one of the components in Islam, this idea of no risk, and you add nothing of benefit to the economy other than, you just have some money. Well, we have that issue. Now the most rich, they are in a position now to take advantage of the whole system and funnel all the money up to them, which is not something that we want in Islam. You also have mudaraba or aqd, depending on, it's the same name, just different things. This is actually what the Prophet ﷺ did with Sayyidah Khadija radiallahu anha. So she had a lot of money, right? So you could think of it of how when someone gives their money to, to those mutual funds, they take the money and they invest for you in these kind of things, right? You say basically, I have a bunch of money, I don't want to do anything. So I give you the money, we agree on a fee for this, and you go and you work with the money and you do what you do, and you keep this much, you get your fee, and I get my profit. This is another form of a sale. Of course, you have foreign exchange, many different kinds of things. It's a big amount of, a large amount of contracts. Okay, when we studied this, this entire chapter probably took 50 lessons or more. Each lesson went up to 2-3 hours, just to give you the idea of how much there is out there.
So this question is for Shomail, Malik. The question asks, how did you start and how did you raise the initial capital so young?
I got started because my brother, while he was at Rutgers, made a deal with my parents, who, like most Pakistanis and Arabs and stuff, we were conceived to be doctors and engineers. This was not part of the plan. So I came here, I was doing cell bio neuroscience, right? Which I'm sure many of you guys are probably doing today. My brother made a deal with my parents that I'm going to graduate early, I'm taking all these summer courses, I'm going to try this real estate thing out. Because somebody, a friend of ours, Sufyan, and his father, Muhammad Abbasi, who's up in North Jersey, they had kind of introduced us to real estate. So the bug was still there even after we graduated, and he went into it full force, and he flipped a couple of properties, and then on Livingston Avenue, where NBIC is, just a little bit further down, he flipped a house and made like $120,000, right? He was like 22 years old. He comes, he gives the check to the teller, and she's thinking like, something illegal just went down. Like, what's going on here? He's this young, and and I'm thinking to myself that I'm in corporate America. I've got this nice, cushy, buttoned-up job. I've got a company car. All the things that look like success. And he didn't work the rest of the year. Like, he was living at home with my parents. He wasn't married. He's 22, and I'm like, all right, there's something here. So I asked my younger brother, teach me what you're doing here. And so he started, this is what I've, figured out. I've met with these people. And so that's how I got started. First 4 years though, I didn't bring outside money in. It was all done with my own money. And that's the easiest, because if you get a punch to the gut and you lose your own money, you lost your own money. But when you take somebody else's money, that's an amana, right? They've worked extremely hard for that. And yes, there's risk in it, but your job as the operator is to mitigate that risk as much as possible, right? And you're going to do that by making sure that you did your homework right, that you did your due diligence on the property, and that that all through the process you do everything the best you can. At the end of the day, the results are going to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But that you looked at all the numbers, you went into the deal, you underwrote it in a very conservative manner, to the point where you're like, this is a grand slam, right? And even if it's not a grand slam, it's at least a double, right? And that's the approach that we've always taken, is that if a deal ever looked like it might work or it might not work, we immediately ruled it out. It's not going to work. Because there's just too little of a margin of error that if I cross it, I'm going to go into the red, and it's going to go upside down very quickly. So after I had about 4 years of experience, and I went in front of investors to pitch this, like I told you guys about, and I remember that night so vividly, August of 2012, and I was like in my late 20s, and I'm in a room full of uncles from the community, but they're all like executives at their respective companies. I had enough of a track record where I could say, here's deal number 1, here's deal number 2, here's what we did in 2008, here's what we did in 2009, and here we are in 2012, here's all the deals I've already done. Every single one of these, alhamdulillah, has made money. We haven't lost money on any single deal. Inshallah, we don't in the future. And that night, I had a deal to present to them. It was the one on Jefferson Street. And I said, who's in? And I'm like, I'm not asking you to cut a check right now, but here's a form, fill it out, and then I'll have a one-on-one consultation with you. And when you perform, then people are like, all right, well, he knows what he's doing. So those people that invested like $25,000, all of a sudden we're now investing $100,000. And then they told other people, and they brought them in. Because, in investing, it's very much, I can advertise, I can market, and so on and so forth, but somebody else's word is much more heavier. And then if you can perform, you'll be able to snowball that very, very quickly.
This next question is for you too. What are some ways someone with no experience in real estate can get started?
The first is there's a 70-hour course. It's like $300 to get your real estate license. It's a lot of laws and theory, and then most of it you don't actually apply in the real world, in the practical. Kind of like college. I'm just kidding. No, I'm just joking. But no, you take the real estate licensing course. That's number 1. Number 2, today, look, before this stuff used to be like esoteric knowledge. You had to pay $25,000, $30,000, $40,000 to mentorship programs and things like that. Now, if you can put how to in front of a question, it's on YouTube, right? How do I tie my shoelaces? How do I flip a property? How do I raise capital for real estate investing? It's all on YouTube. Get some black coffee, lock yourself up in your room and just get on YouTube for like a couple of weekends straight, and you can learn this stuff. We also have, we codified this and created a whole curriculum out of it. We've been teaching it since 2014. If you're interested in that, you can look that up. And there's no shortage of people that teach this out there now. But before, you had to like really seek it out, and now it's all over the place.
What is an Islamic perspective on options trading, given that you need to own what you are selling?
Yeah, so the majority, if not all of the scholars that I've seen comment on options trading is that it's not permissible. Okay, due to the fact that you cannot buy the option to do something. Right? This is not a valid form of trade. Like buying so for example, this is a classic example, right? Or I'll take the example, I'll make it relevant today. Forget about options contracts. I sell you the option, right? I sell you the option to buy this phone from me next year. Like, I don't give you the option. I sell you the option to do that next year, right? That's a classic case of something that's haram in the books. So same thing with stocks, right? I've seen a small amount of nuance, but the small amount that I've seen, the majority of the scholars, they say it's haram as well. So, Allahu A'lam.
Right. The next question is, what is the Islamic view of drop shipping?
So with drop shipping, again, the majority, the three of the madhabs, they say it's not permissible. I've seen Sheikh Joe Bradford, so since I do not know the Hanbali madhab, I'm going to quote him quoting the Hanbali madhab and put it on his neck. So I've seen him quote that it's allowed in that madhab, but in the other three it is not allowed.
The next question is, how does refinancing a house work?
So essentially what a financial institution will do is they're going to send out a third-party neutral appraiser to the property. That appraiser is going to come up with a valuation of that property, what the property is worth. They use, basic appraisal principles, which is usually looking within a 1 mile radius. Sometimes they'll tighten the radius to 0.5 miles. Similar type of properties, same number of bedrooms and bathrooms and so on, and that's what they call comparable sales. So other properties that are sold in that neighborhood for that amount that look like your subject property, and they come up with a value that your house is worth this much on this day, right? And that report then comes to that financial institution. They say that, okay, the house is worth this much, we're willing to lend. Most of them will do 70, 75, or 80%. So if you go to UIF for guidance, I think it's around 75%. So 75% of, let's say, $200,000 will be $150,000. That $150,000 will come to you. So let's say you had cash in the property, right? Now this $150,000 comes to you. Let's say if I had partners on this deal, I can pay them back. They get their money back and so on and so forth. But now they're $175,000 in terms of ownership. If it's a musharaka deal, like with guidance, they are in the deal with you. That has a mortgage payment that's going to be made to them every single month. So if you have a renter, a tenant that's living at that property, when you have a liability like a car, you make the payment out of your pocket. But here you have a payment also. Who's making the payment? This tenant gets up every morning, they go, they work a 9 to 5, they come back, and their biggest expense is housing. So essentially it's almost like they're working for you, because most of the money that they get from their employer, they're just a messenger. They get it and they hand it to you, right? And that rent that you receive should be more than what you're paying to that financial institution. So they'll look at something called a DSCR, the debt service coverage ratio, and it should be 1.2 the amount of the loan. Simply meaning that whatever the net income is from the property is 20% more than what the payments that you make to them. Okay, so the property is always in a cash flow positive situation. And so that's how a refinance works. Now, if that property really appraised, like let's say, usually, the general principle is that real estate, if you buy it right, appreciates over time, right? Yeah, it'll have ebbs and flows in the market, but over time it's going up, right? And so, let's say it doesn't go to 200,000. Let's say this property goes way higher. Let's say some event like COVID happens and it goes double. And it goes to 400,000, but I've only got 100,000 in this deal, right? The money that I pull out, I can pull out now 300,000 from this property. 100,000 is paid back, and now this extra 200,000, it's tax-free income. What was the other way that I could make money from this property? It's to sell the property altogether, right? So think about, contrast these two things. If I sell the property, I have a capital gain, the profit that I made, which is 300,000. I bought it for 100, I sell it for 400. I have to pay taxes, long-term capital gains on $300,000, unless I do something called a 1031 exchange, which, it's a separate question. But the other way that I can tap into this money, if I need the money, is to do a refinance and keep the property. So I can have my cake and eat it too. So now I keep the property, I get the money out at $300,000, and now the renter who's staying there is going to pay down the rent over the next, if it's a 15-year loan or a 30-year mortgage, they're going to pay that down over the next 15 to 30 years. So that's how a refinance is done. So the way builders do this is, let's say I buy a property, I knock it down, and I'm going to build a much bigger building on this, right? They borrow most of this capital, and with the building, because of the number of units, it's not appraised by looking at what else sold in the neighborhood. It's appraised by how much income it produces. So if you go on Hamilton Street, you'll see there's an 82-unit student housing apartment building there, right? And each of those rents for like $2,000 a month. So he knew exactly what he was doing. He borrowed pretty much all of the money from, this is a non-Islamic finance deal, right? So you understand. And this is how all builders do it. He borrows all of it, gets a construction loan, he puts up this big building, right? Then he brings a bank to appraise the building. It appraises for way more, millions of dollars more, right? They go and they refinance, they pay back the first loan, the construction loan and all that. Now all that's paid back, and now he's got debt on this property. That's being paid by all the students that are living in these 82 units, right? And all that money that he pulled out and he pocketed, he doesn't pay taxes on it. It's tax-free income, right? This is how a lot of the people that, senators and people that are in the White, a lot of people that